What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Ruben and Jessie podcast. And today we have a really special guest, the great and powerful Derek Rodenbeck. How you doing, brother?
Doing
Ooh,
well.
he's
How you
throwing
doing?
up them guns, man. I'm liking what I'm seeing.
You said powerfully, so I mean, but power is not just in that.
Yes. He's rocking the Spider-Man shirt. He's chilling in Vermont. His man is a wild beast now.
Yeah, it's true. I unfortunately shaved my beard recently, so sadly I'm not as beast-like, but we're getting there. This is day 2 or 3, so it'll be back.
Jesus, they're only day 2, and that's how much you grow. I'm like so jealous, man.
Man.
This is a month for those watching on YouTube. I mean, for those only listening, I barely have like a 5 o'clock shadow. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I always joke. I'm like, like the more this is growing, the less like this is happening up here, this situation. So, but this is like, I don't want to use the word girthy, but hey, it's just a girthy beard.
It's a girthy beard. That's going to be the title of this episode. Girthy beard with Derek Rodenbeck. All right.
Wait, sorry, Jessie. But when I first met Derek, where we were in New York City, Derek had this beard, man. Like I remember Derek, like your beard was beautiful, man. Like you had this it was all in, and you look just like very grizzly. Like no one can fuck with Derek. You know what I mean? Like
when my wife and I actually got married, we had just come back from our like almost half-year trip together, and I think it was like down to here, and it was just this like long mess of.
You had a Gandalf beard?
Yeah, it was like kind of like a bird's nest / like a combination of like 6 bird nests into 1 bird nest. But she looks at pictures of me and she's like, oh my God, I can't believe I married you like that. I'm like, well, you did.
All right, so enough beard talk. Jessie, you had a question, Joe.
Well, actually, that's exactly where I wanted to start. I definitely want to get into your story, Derek, because it is fascinating. But I think it's good to figure, to hear about how you came to be on the show. And Ruben, if you kind of want to direct that and let everyone know how you guys met, because I think that's a cool story in itself as well. And then we could dive into everything else.
Yeah, Derek, I don't know if you remember, but I think we met either in an Elliot Hulse event or on the group that he used to have on Facebook.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to like have clarity on, because I don't exactly remember either. I'm like recalling, I'm like, oh, did we meet in Tampa together?
Yes.
You were at the Non-Jobs, right?
The Non-Jobs Revolution event.
Right. So I think we connected there, but it was like one of those situations where there were so many different people, peripherally. I think we maybe had a few conversations, but then I think it was actually on the social media group that you and I connected, and then it kind of like spiraled from there. So
yes, sir.
Yeah,
I think I remember you posting on the Facebook group that you were going to be in New York for a short stint, and if anyone was around, we could link up. And folks, this was probably about 6 years ago, because it was before I left to China.
Wow.
And I remember we link up. You had Kuma with you,
right?
Kuma, and like everyone would stop Derek because of this dog.
Yeah, it's no joke. I mean, it was kind of surreal because when he was alive, I had him for just shy of 12 years. I was gonna wear this today because like my hair is insane, but this is like
I saw that hat.
That's him. My wife actually got this for me for the holidays, so I wear it all the time, and it smells bad. But it is one of those things where like everywhere we went, like it was probably the closest experience I've had to being a celebrity, and it was just like being a celebrity's friend, So everywhere we went, literally people would stop their cars, people would and I met so many interesting, like wonderful people. And just taking him everywhere, that's just kind of like, that was life. But also there were some times where, I would just like hear the same joke every time. So I'd be like, oh, is that a horse? Or, oh, and I'm just like, No, it's a dog, but it's the first time you've had this interaction, so okay, we'll go with that. But there were some times where I was just like, oh, I just want to walk you, dude. Like I just want to feel.
But this, for folks listening, I know that you're gonna come back to Kuma often because I feel like Derek, Kuma was an extension of you. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
a huge, and there's so many like lessons there that I think, and I think we'll go into how you met your wife and like how Kuma was such a big part of that, as well as I'm not familiar with your wife's dog's name.
Balto.
Balto. So Balto, Kuma, they met, and like that created what you have now with your wife. But before we even get there, I definitely want to like rewind us because that's how we met. But I know before that, you had a crazy life, man. Like military.
You
were in Iraq. Like there's a lot there, and I'm curious. I don't think we ever talk about this. Like what gave you that that green light to be like, I'm gonna join the military, I'm gonna do this and get into photography? Because that leads us to your pretty much what your primary thing that you do is, which is art.
Right. So yeah, I guess I'll just kind of take it away real quick. And so I think what ultimately was I don't know. When it comes to the military, I come from a military family, and my grandfather, he fought in World War II. He was D-Day plus 90, so he landed, I think it was, I forget which beach, so I don't want to say what beach, but he landed on one of the major beaches in France 90 days after D-Day. And then he fought in France for, I think it was about a year. He fought the Nazis, and then he ended up getting hit by a basically German mortar, and it should have killed him. He had shrapnel all up and down his body. And actually, it's really cool because his interviews in like the Library of Congress, who was a Bronze Star recipient.
That's crazy.
Yeah, just like a badass guy, like, and he was like, to me, like the definition of like what, like just a man, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was also intelligent, compassionate, and he was also just like a big burly monster monstrous human being. He was 6'4". He was a bar gunner, in the military, and
that's what is a bar gunner?
So it's just a BAR, like it's like an automatic, it's a large automatic rifle. So he would just walk around with this thing, and then he had like somebody with him who would carry his ammunition. And if they came into contact with the enemy, he would then do business, and once business was done, go back and do whatever else he needed to do. But I think the way things ended up with him is they were going up and they were attacking like some port up in France or something, because they like cornered all the Nazis or whatever into this one like isolated area. And that was like kind of like their mission, what they ended up doing. But it's kind of cool though, because that was like one of the reasons. And then my stepfather, he was in the Navy. He passed away when I was about, I think 11 or 12 years old. I kind of feel like he was involved in special operations, just because he was always in the Middle East in the 90s, and he was just always gone, so when he passed away, we ended up having some, I guess it was a captain of some ship he was on, which was like a special operations boat or whatever. So I don't know like what the extent of what he did or what it was that he was doing. Even if it was like support, I have no idea. But that was that. And then when he passed away, I got involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters, which is an organization which is really awesome. I'd actually like to get involved in that sometime in the future, whether that's directly or just like donating money or something, because it helped me a lot. But I ended up being matched with a captain in the United States Army. And so like ultimately, like this shaggy dog tale is the military has been like kind of like an integral part of my life growing up. And that's ultimately why that led me down the path of like, okay, well, I want to join the army to ultimately just serve something greater than myself. In addition to that, I really had no aspirations or dreams or anything when it comes to continuing education or utilizing a lot of the services that were, I guess, associated with joining the military. Uh, I felt like it was just something that I should do. It was just like, okay, this is just what you do, and then that there's layers and complex, I guess, ideological frameworks that are built upon that, obviously, with like experience and time and hindsight biases and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's how I guess I eventually ended up getting there, signing the paperwork and going off the boot camp, and
So how did you start getting into photography in the military?
yeah.
Were you already doing like was that an interest of yours before?
Yeah, I mean, photography in general has always been interesting to me. When I was a kid, I used to walk around with like the disposable cameras because my mother never would buy me one or anything, a real camera. But I would walk around with like this disposable cameras, like chasing ducks and stuff like that. Like really, like just kind of, I don't know, just kid things. But when it came to the military, I did not join as anything public affairs or combat camera or anything like that. It was just I joined as a military police officer, and that's what I thought I was going to do. And again, for me personally, I had the strangest military career. So my career was not was very atypical.
Can you share how? Can you tell us how that played
Sure.
out?
Sure. So essentially, my unit that I was initially assigned to was disbanding, or had word that they were disbanding. And this was in 2006, I think. So this was a while ago. um, but
For those who don't know, what does disbanding mean?
uh, basically, it just means the needs of the military said, hey, this unit is not really operating in a way that we need it to. We could use the resources other places, so we're just going to nix the unit, and your people are going to kind of go all over the place, and your assets are going to go everywhere. If I had that right, I wasn't in command or anything. So my commander at the time, she was basically gave us this information and said, hey, do you guys want to come with me to Iraq? I need a PSD team, and a PSD team is a personal security detail. So that job just entails basically what they would say is like, if you have a package and you keep that package from getting killed, captured, blah 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 blah, you know. Um, so my buddies and I kind of all looked at each other, and she's like, I'm gonna have a essentially it's like signing up for theater. She's like, I'm gonna have like this like piece of paper with the pen, you can put your name on it. You have 2 hours to decide. And so we're kind of like, oh shit, all right. And my whole like kind of like philosophy with all this, I think in general, was I didn't really want to be told what to do or when I was doing something. I kind of wanted to manifest my own destiny and have a little bit of control, and that does not happen in the military. So I decided to, after about a half hour, I was like, all right, well, I'll put my name on the paper, and that was that. So that a little bit of control.
And then you became, I guess, while you were doing that security detail, you had a camera in your hand just by getting into it, or just like they were like, hey, we need you to take photos of something, or were you just like, I'm doing this because I'm in Iraq, like might as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in, I think, documenting things
Right.
in general. And I've always been interested in human behavior and, the environment and blah, 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 blah. But I remember going to the Sony store in the King of Prussia Mall before I think it was like a week out from going. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to buy like a little video camera. and I'm just gonna, because they didn't really have GoPros or anything back then. I was like, okay, I'll buy this video camera and I'm just going to film stuff, film what I see, and film just the living experience, the just honestly boringness, of it all. And then I ended up doing like some video for mobilization, and I was also breaking down a weapon system, and from cleaning our weapons, I was basically taking all the grime from it, and I was just bored, and I was using the metal that we use, like the brushes and stuff, to clean our rifles, and I ended up drawing like a portrait with like the gunk from the weapon. And
dude, creative as hell.
yeah, I mean, yeah, you also have a lot of time. so in conjunction with these two really strange like things of me just being artistic and bored, I eventually people saw that I was making videos, and then I had another buddy who worked basically parallel with the commander and just kind of like took what I made and was like, oh, let's I want to show her this. And so it all of a sudden became like, I'm the art guy, which is, it's one of those things where it's also like, you ended up getting like a lot of extra duty when people start seeing that you have talents elsewhere. So when we were in Kuwait, my deputy commander essentially came up to me after like seeing like a lot of the video content and stuff that I was editing. I was working off like a MacBook Pro. I had Final Cut. I think it was Final Cut Pro 6 or 7 at the time. Like 2 gigs of RAM, slow. But he sat me down and he showed me this like, I don't know, thing. It was like a slideshow or something that their public affairs officer, who was a major at the time, put together for the unit. And we watch it, and then he stops and he looks at me. He goes, "What did you think?" And I go, "Well, it's." And he just stops me. He goes, "It sucks." He's like, "It's bad, right?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it is. It's pretty bad." Hey, and there's this one thing where there's like this, like, I'll never forget. There's like this picture, and it's just like moving across the screen, like literally like this, And he's like, "That's like the extent of this thing. That's like the big wow of it." So they actually ended up firing him, and they sent him back home, and I was just a newly like christened buck sergeant at the time. So just like the little 3 stripes there. And, he just turned to me and said, "So how do you feel about being the brigade public affairs officer?" And I remember I sat down, for a second. I was just like, "Oh, well, I was like, all right, well," I said, "Do you have a book on that?" And he's like, "Well, we can dig something up." I never got a book. I never got anything dug up, and I never got direction. What I did get was about $100,000 worth of equipment that they just bought, and they said, "Go have at it." So my first kind of, and honestly, like I had never touched like a DSLR. I never, I had never done anything with any of this stuff. And so then I like kind of like connected with what they call an MPAD. I connected with an MPAD in Iraq, and from there I kind of got some hands-on experience with them. And they're kind of like, the best way to describe them is they're media, like news type people. So they would build out stories for Armed Forces Network and do stuff like that. So so I just jumped in, and that's what I ended up kind of doing. Yeah.
You got an art education in the military. How many?
Yeah. Seriously.
Wow, that's wild, man. That's wild. I think that's so fascinating for people to hear. It's even fascinating for me to hear, because I think often people consider the military, and maybe not even just the military, but I think Western culture in general, we appreciate art, but we don't appreciate it on paper, meaning like when it comes down to the funds and financing artists and programs and supporting. Right.
Even in schools,
Yeah, even in schools. I remember multiple times in multiple of the schools I went to, like we had to raise money for the art departments because they just didn't have funding to, and like teachers would buy the crayons or the paper and shit like that. And so it's just fascinating to hear that in a place that, people would think is extremely type A, very logical, very just like brass tacks about it. Here is a guy who is like being seen for his art and the importance of it. And I'd be curious to hear what you think art, like what type of impact do you think your art or just art in general had on your fellow soldiers in that place? Why do you think it was important to create good art in that type of environment and to document what you guys were seeing? What type of impact did that have on everyone around you?
Yeah, I think ultimately, and this might actually be a short answer. I mean, you can always say morale is, associated with all of that stuff. But I think there's also just a genuine interest in what's happening around us. We're human beings ultimately. So as human beings, we tell stories to each other. It's like just rooted and ingrained in us. And and a large facet of storytelling is done through mediums such as whether it's a photograph, a video, or an illustration. These are just ways of us communicating things, basically ideas and thoughts, in a narrative way that we can either respond directly to each other at that moment in time, or look back upon, or even vent off some steam. And we made also stupid videos. I mean, it's just it's just a process of again telling a story, and that also amplified when, sorry, I just got a call. That also amplified when I ended up doing some stories for Armed Forces Network and stuff too. So
when you were, because I know you mentioned you were also doing documentation when you were out there. So when you say documentation, what did that involve? Were you actually there after certain, I don't know what goes on, but after certain scenes, fight, like things that broke out, would you show up on the scene afterwards and take photos or videos of, like just how the environment looked and stuff?
I would say like the latter, like how the environment looks. So a lot of it is just, you gear up for whatever mission you have for the day. And, whether that's going to be in a truck, whether that's going to be in an aircraft, and then you kind of isolate what it is that people in general are doing. And that could be your, fellow soldiers, or it could be, people surrounding, your fellow soldiers, citizens, or Iraqi army, individuals or whatever. And I don't think it's anything that you could necessarily plan for in general. It's just, okay, we have to go from point A to point B. This is X thing that we're doing. And let's just film the process, or let's just photograph the process. And that's all I think anything really is, honestly. Like, nobody can predict the future in any capacity whatsoever. So it's just like the process of anything. I didn't necessarily do like a lot of response stuff. So, if something happened where, I mean, people are moving about quickly anyway. So, I mean, it's not just, it's just, yeah.
That's not how it would go down. So yeah, when you think about that time, were there any, it's interesting because this is also you like learning,
right?
You literally learning as you go. And I'm assuming you're also starting to grow an appreciation for photography that maybe you probably didn't have before.
Right.
So were there some shots? Because that's an intense environment to shoot in. You're not on the beach or in a flower field. You're in fucking Iraq during the war. So were there some certain shots that you remember that you still think about at times, or just things you look at and you're like, damn, I can't believe
Yeah.
I that.
I think like there's just one in particular that really kind of gets me. It's this there was a little girl, and she was with her brother. Her brother was throwing rocks at us, and she was on like kind of like this HESCO barrier, and we were weapons testing and going out, to do a, just a mission or whatever. I think we were going to go towards Iran, but she was just kind of standing there, and I it chokes me up, because I got kids.
Yeah.
Give me a minute.
Yeah, man. This is what we do here.
Yeah.
Men feel, guys. Men feel.
Yeah. It's silly, it's so silly. She was just holding a 50 cal shell, and she was using it as a microphone.
Wow. What a portrayal of like this area, this war that was happening. I can't even imagine just like looking at that and just being like, is this real life?
Yeah.
What's going on out here? And I'm pretty I mean, I can't speak for you, but I can only imagine like what was going on in your mind as you saw that. Yeah. And it's just, and I know that it like,
I don't know why that gets me. It just does,
because it's, I mean, I feel like a little girl, I mean, obviously as a father as well, like you think back to that and you're just like, imagine if that was my little girl, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can only imagine where that brings you. So
yeah. And I was just filming her doing this and took a few photographs of her. And I just remember thinking, I was like, oh man, like this sucks.
Yeah.
She was just like sitting there singing, pretending whatever it was. She was pretending. There's kids.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep trucking along on this journey, man. So, all right. So, how long were you still continuing this work in the military before you left?
Well, it's kind of funny because we came back, and from there I kind of segregated myself from the military. I was like, I'm over this, And the funny thing is my grandfather, before I left, he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, he kind of grabs me by both my arms. And he goes, "Hey, no more Purple Hearts in the family. We got enough of those already." And that's something that is just, I don't know, it cracks me up. But so it was just kind of like after that whole experience, I was like, okay, what's next? Because I felt like I had more to contribute than that. And not to say that that's a less than symbol or anything. For some people, being in the military their whole lives is an amazing thing, and it opens a lot of opportunities and doors. But for me, it just felt like there's something else. So I actually went to the Kubert school. I enrolled in the Kubert school, and but like a little bit before that, it was basically like 3 or 4 weeks after I came home, I jumped right into community college. So I ended up finishing my associates. And I remember sitting down, it was kind of funny. Like they were asking students, "Oh, what were you doing, over winter break?" And a few students were saying like, blah blah, I was doing this, I was like, I was walking around Baghdad. And that was just, so I ended up after that getting my associate's degree and going to the Kubert School. And the Kubert School is actually a comic book focused institution.
Oh, awesome. Go ahead, Ruben.
No, I was like, I remember that you had, because I went to your house in Philly. I don't know if you were living there when you first came back from the military, but I remember you had the huge drawing desk, and you were really like into it. You had you and, I'm sorry, I forget his name, the Art Bros. Y'all
Yeah,
had
Nick.
that going? Nick, yes,
Yeah.
Nick. And y'all were doing a lot of the comic book stuff and like interview
Right.
style stuff and like talking about all these illustrations that y'all created.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I was like, oh, not only is Derek into photography, he's also an illustrator. And he does like actual drawings,
Right.
both on hand and digitally. So I'm like, whoa, this dude is like multi-talented creatively, which is like, I think you have to like utilize different parts of the brain for photography versus like drawing something versus like video editing. So I was like, oh, this dude is dope. Like, you know, that's what I got from you when I went out there and we hung out for that day. And I was like, oh, not only is he like this creative artist, but he gets it in the gym because we went to the gym. I remember that, man. And I was just like, this is something, you know, most people don't see that. It's like if you're an artist, you're like, you know, like, oh, you're like all hippie and you don't go to the gym or any of
That's a
that.
type.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
it's a
type.
type. It's a type. But like,
Yeah.
this is the first time I saw someone who was like, oh, this guy gets it in. He's into his health. He's into his fitness. But he
Yeah.
gets it in the room and gets the creativity out. So it's like to me, I was seeing in a flesh and bone, I was seeing this beautiful mix of like this masculine and feminine. A lot of people say feminine
Yeah.
energy is very creative and brings
Right.
that out of us. And then when you go to the gym and you hit it hard, that's like that masculine coming out. So it's like Derek has this beautiful fusion of both. And he has this compassion and he has all these things. And the way you were with Kuma, and that's why I've seen that
Yeah.
compassion. And I don't know, you just fascinated me, man. When we had only in total like a few hours we spent together because I ended up leaving to China, which was unfortunate in terms of our friendship. But I was just like,
yeah, I was sad, man. I was like, oh, like
we just made good friends. And
yeah, Ruben's cool. Like, I was like, oh, but like he's going to China, and that's also pretty cool. So
and yeah, I know you had that experience. I don't know how many years was between when you came back to when you know we met. So I'm curious to know what happened between that time.
yeah, I mean that's I have a lot of, again, layers of simultaneous things kind of happening at once. So when I came back, it was at the very, very beginning of 2009. We'll just say 2009. And then it was, I think, 2010, I went to the Kubert School. So and that was a 3-year program. So I was in Jersey, North Jersey for.
What made you, because I had the assumption that, oh, okay, you started in photography and then you just rode that wave. What made you want to get into comic books?
I've always been kind of into them, you know, and again, I think it's not necessarily the photography or the videography or the drawing. It's really none of those things. Those are just tools. I think for me, it's just the stories.
Right.
And the stories, like for example, right now, I've been writing a novel. So like that's what I've been doing for the past couple months is I think 33,000 words into this thing. And that's it's just a layer. It's another medium to do what I ultimately do, which is storytell. And it took me a long time to figure out that the actual thing that I do is that I storytell. I'm not a comic book artist. I'm not an illustrator. I'm not a painter. I'm not a photographer. I'm not a videographer. I'm none of those things, you know, but I am all those things. Those are just pieces that ultimately, you know, they're fractals that, you know, you put them together.
Absolutely. And I could totally relate to that. I've never met anyone who's been to comic book school, so I have so many questions. What did you learn at comic book school? Like what is like your schedule like? Like what are your classes like going to comic book school?
So interestingly enough, I decided I like to do like kind of intense, like challenging things. So the Kubert School at the time was known as the Navy SEALs of art schools. Like, not even joking. And I think they had like an interview on MTV, and that's like how it was described. But ultimately the Kubert School was taught by industry professionals within the comic book industry, and they basically throw you into this insane program that's 10 classes a week, and that's what it is for 3 years. And each of the classes have assignments, and you do those assignments. And if you fail, I think one class, you have to start the whole year over again. So we started, I think, with I want to I 3 or 4 classes. So don't quote me on it. I a large sum of people will just say, and I think by the end there was 14 or 16 of us that made
Whoa.
it through the whole program. So, and my first year actually was commuting from Philadelphia. So I would drive basically 2 hours in the morning, do the school from 8 till 3, and then I'd drive back 2 hours and get home at 6-ish with traffic, and then do homework, and then go back and do it again. So luckily that situation was remedied for the next year, because that was unsustainable.
Wow. And so what were these assignments? Like, what do they have you do?
Literally anything and everything that you could associate with what you need to do to be able to draw a comic. So you could talk about, like, let's say, for example, like gestalt in making an image, perspective, drawing perspective, human anatomy, history of artists, creators, just narrative storytelling, how to tell a story, gestures, acting, not us physically acting, but studying, human behavior. So it's kind of interesting because, like, for a non-degree bearing school, it really was, it just went pretty deep as far as the fundamentals, the structures of the things that you actually needed to learn. And I got lucky because the class year that I had, the best man on my wedding, was, his name's Max Fuchs, and he's on like a really like very well-known title. It's just the book's not out yet, so I can't say anything about it. But right now, and he's just an insanely talented guy. And it was like kind of like everybody that we were in like this bullpen with of class were all insanely talented. Just I was like, I don't even understand how I'm with these people, because they're just so good at what they do. And it was really cool because we got the opportunity to just be idiots together and learn together, and have a good time. And if for some reason, for example, like, artists like to draw penises like everywhere. So like that's it's one of those things where it's, I don't know, that's like the vibe. Yeah, we're just all like, literally the vibe is like, it's just like everyone's just so chill, and everyone's so comfortable with each other, and you can truly be yourself around each other. There's no walls, no barriers. And it kind of honestly reminded me of the military a little bit, of like just being with a group of people, and just being so connected. And that's really what that school did. Is it just, the people that stuck around, you fused into this group. And we still talk and have conversations. Like I said, one of the guys, Max, he was the best man at my wedding. So
Wow.
yeah.
Did you feel like, because it's like you said, you're studying so much about the way humans are and action is and the way things take place, do you feel like it began to shape, like create a different shape of how you viewed people and how you viewed the world?
I'm not sure, honestly. I don't think that's anything I ever necessarily thought of until you just asked that. So, and maybe I have before, but I'm also a exhausted parent. So I have 2 kids, and maybe my recall is just not happening there. I would say, as far as my time there and drawing comics, I think it made me understand stories a little bit more. in the sense of maybe you know, if we like look at a heliocentric model of our solar system, you know, like maybe I'm not the sun, you know what I mean? Like there's other systems that I'm orbiting around, you know, and these systems are all each in their own have stories, you know. So I think it kind of humanizes everything, you know, in a sense, if that makes sense. It probably doesn't make sense. It's
Well, to someone who's listening, it will make a lot of sense to them.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, okay. So were you already on your own at this point? Were you living at home with family?
Yeah.
So when did you begin to work as an artist? And wherever you feel, I'm sorry, I have forgotten your dog's name.
It's Kuma.
Kuma. Wherever you want to weave Kuma into that story,
Sure.
as you began to embark on your career, please do.
Sure. So the interesting thing is, I would say, I guess I worked as an artist probably 2015. And I only did that for about, I don't know, like a year and a half. So working as an artist is extremely difficult, as many people will tell you. And it's not just the difficulties in, I think, how you're setting up a system to get your next paycheck. And this is where the Hubert School failed, is because they didn't do a good job as far as teaching how to be, how to A, have a system, and B, have a business. Um, if you're ultimately contracted to do work, or you're seeking work, you know, from a variety of sources, you need to understand how to systematize things, and then also how to run a business, and how to do taxes, and you know, how to do all of these things in general. And I think that's most art schools. It's not just a Hubert School thing, it's a art school thing slash school thing, unless you go to school for finance or something like that. So I had to kind of learn from the school of hard knocks that, you know, you can't just graduate from art school and then, you know, expect people to start calling you.
Like any
Marvel,
school, actually.
right. Marvel and DC are not going to start like knocking on your door, because I went to tons and tons of Comic Cons, and I had my portfolio, and tons of times where, you know, I was either told, oh, you're not good enough, or I was told, hey, let's hire you. And then you know, here's our card, email us. And then you just never hear from them. And eventually, you know, it wore me out to the point where, because I was like starting to live in like kind of like a poverty range, you know, like it was getting rough. And I was like, this is not sustainable. Things need to change, because this is not going to get me where I need to be in the future. And Kuma, you know, I guess this is where we can tie him in. He was just along for the ride for that whole thing. I actually got Kuma. It was 2006, I believe, 2006, 2007. So he, you know, stayed with my mother when I was overseas, and you know, she took care of him for that year. And it was kind of funny. My friends would make fun of me because they'd have like, you know, a picture of a girlfriend or something up, and I literally had an Akita calendar, like, and a picture of my dog. Like, I'm not even playing. Like, I carried a picture of my dog. I had a girlfriend at the time. Like,
I love my dog more than I love you.
yeah, and I did. I really did. um, so, yeah, Kuma was just along for the ride for it all. And I think that's why, other than the fact that Kuma had this just like, I don't know, transcendence, like, I don't even know how to explain it. There's just like something about him that was special. And I know like people are out there like, yeah, right, whatever, but I'm not even like, I'm not fucking around. Like, I'm not playing. Like, if you met him, like you would, and
I
that's
know,
why.
man. I met him.
Yeah. Like it's not because he was my dog. It's not because of any of these things. Like he just had a soul, like for real. Like he had a soul.
I think, and we can. I would love to fast forward a bit because you bring in Kuma, and obviously, for folks that don't know, he's an Akita, and if you Google that, you'll see what an Akita looks like. But it's probably one of the most gorgeous dogs on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
And I remember being in China. I think we connected when I was out there, because you posted a picture of a new girl, which currently your wife.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, you got a girl. Like, how'd you meet? And you tell me a story, and I was like, this sounds like a fucking fairy tale.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, just like we fast forward, the military art school, you're living in Philly. You go out one day to take Kuma for a walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, how I mentioned GoPro earlier, they better like sponsor me after this. I got a GoPro.
Find love with GoPro.
Yeah, I finally got a GoPro, and it's like something I wanted for so long. I finally got a GoPro. It's a GoPro Hero 3. Yeah, we're really again, dating all this. And I got the case, and then I got like the dog harness. I was like, I'm gonna put this on him. And I was just like, I'm gonna film this very first time of having this thing, and I'm just gonna see how this thing works. So I stuck it on his back, and interestingly enough, a quick non sequitur. I think I recently posted a video of us meeting. So I met my wife that day, and I have it on video. So I posted that recently.
Isn't that crazy, Jessie?
Yeah.
That this was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
That's fucking nuts, dude. That's nuts.
I'm like probably the only person on the planet that has this. So I went to a park called Wissahickon Park, which is in Philadelphia. And I think a lot more people know about it now. But it's like kind of like a secret park because it's in northwestern Philadelphia. And if you're from the area, you know about it. But if you're not, like it's just not something but it's probably one of the most beautiful parks, I think, in a city. It's just gorgeous. It's a gorgeous park. So I would go back there almost every day and go for a run or, go for a walk or take Kuma back there. It was just kind of like my backyard in a sense. People would ride horses back there. I mean, it's crazy. So yeah, I just see this girl locking up her bike, and it was just like walking by. I was like, oh, she's pretty. she that's initially obviously human attraction. That's the first thing that comes, and I walked by, and then I was just like, I said hi. She said hi, and I stopped, and I was like, I just need to pretend to look at this waterfall, and see if she'll walk by again, because I didn't have like the best game in the world, but, I got some, but so she walks by, and that's actually when she said, we both said hi. See, that's a funny thing about memories, and then she just keeps walking, and, I'm standing there, and I'm like, all right, well, I have a choice essentially. Like that could be it, or, I could maybe go talk to her. And I opted for going to talk to her. So I kind of ran after her, and she turned around, and we just literally just jumped into a conversation for about, I think the video is 18 minutes long. And I had Meditations by Marcus Aurelius with me. And she had just read that, and we were talking about that for a little bit. And and then I got her number at the end of the walk. Kuma ended up having diarrhea, and that was kind of her cue to leave. So that's how it happened.
Wait, so Kuma, the GoPro was on him.
Yeah.
And recording this entire. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So it was completely by accident. Like, you know what I mean? I was just literally had the GoPro on there just to test it. And I was like, oh, it's pretty cool. Like a different perspective of, the park in Philadelphia in general. And I met my wife.
And that's crazy because now I don't know how long between you guys meeting. Obviously, there's the courting phase, and then
Right.
you go on this road trip together.
Right. Yeah.
That's how long between you meeting to you go? I felt like it was so fast, man. Like I don't know.
It was probably like unreasonably, like unresponsibly fast. But I think we just knew, we did know. But I think she had just graduated law school, so she had like a whole bunch of things going on. And from there, like I think we had like a 3-week gap from talking to each other, because like I didn't want to bother her. I was just like, you got family and you got stuff going on. We can go on a date after all that madness. And we went on like 4 dates, and I've never done like LSD or anything, but I feel like that's what it would feel like to be on LSD. So, and just it was just like a hallucination. Like, I don't know, it was crazy. And we obviously fell in love, and I think my lease was ending for my apartment, and I just talked to my roommate, and I was just like, I'm gonna marry this girl, and she was saying the same thing. Not this girl, this guy, but yeah, we ended up just moving in with each other. And I know it sounds crazy, but it worked. Then she had some uh opportunity to do something with yoga, and because she was like a big yoga practitioner as well. And uh we went and ended up going out to San Francisco. So in doing so, we drove there, and then staying in San Francisco for, I think it was like a month that she did this program. We ended up driving very slowly back and just stopping in national parks and state
Very
parks. And
slowly. I felt like you were doing that for months.
yeah. And it worked because we were kind of like treading water slash like getting more and more into debt as we were doing this. But we house hacked, like we had our apartment, but we Airbnb'd it to some dude who ended up not paying the last month rent. Like so we like, worked on the road. I was drawing a comic book at the time, so I finished up that project while we were on the road. I think half of that comic I drew in literally a bathroom. And yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where we just we made it work. And, we drove my 1998 Subaru Legacy with 2 giant dogs in the back. And, I think we got like one of those, it was like one of those over carriage things. I don't even know what you call them, like a storage thing from my aunt's barn in Indiana. We like tied that to the roof, and the whole car was filled with, food and just crap, to, to camping lifestyle, hotels and camping. So she would be typing away. We had this like little thing called a MiFi, which was like a wireless internet, and we had that like velcroed to the car and turn it on, and she'd be in the passenger seat like doing whatever job, and then I'd stop and then I'd draw. And that's what we did, and that's how it happened.
You guys had literally the life of like what are those people called, like a bohemian lifestyle?
Yeah,
like,
van life stuff.
Yes, it was like, and we just talked about this literally the other day. I was like, dude, because you posted a picture, and I was just like, how did that car survive? Like
it didn't.
it didn't, right? But at the end of the day, you still made that trip. And I think, something Jessie and I have touched on in the past is like, there needs to be a time where like we do things like this. Like there needs to be a time that in your life where, whether that's with someone or alone, you go on this adventure. And it's like we recently had a gentleman on a podcast who talks about this, Philip Folsom, Wolf Tribe,
Cool.
and he talks about that where you just where you go out and it's like you're looking for the gold. You're going into the cave. You're like finding out like what you're truly made of. Like being in a place
Right.
where I know you say you stayed in hotels, but majority of the time
Oh,
you
yeah.
stayed on the road, right?
Right. Yeah.
You stayed in the car just like that.
Yeah. I mean, we had tents and stuff. So
Okay.
we would just, go to a state park or a national park, and mostly state parks and stuff, and pitch a tent. And, once we got tired of that, we would, deconstruct and find ourselves a nice hotel and, sleep in
It's
a
like
bed.
hot shower.
Yeah.
But there's some beauty to that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's anything. Obviously, you were with your now wife. I
Yeah.
guess that decision. I think you got engaged on that trip. Am I wrong? Or
no, it was in Philadelphia when
okay,
we, I guess, got engaged, but the timeline of like our marriage slash engagement is all weird and wonky. So it's just because like we did like a courthouse wedding, and then then we had an actual wedding, and those were a year and some change apart, and then so it's but then I asked her
non-traditional.
Right. So it's just like the timeline is just kind of all over the place.
And that's fine, man. And I feel like, back in the day when I was in my early 20s, and this is kind of like this part is all about like love. And that's why I wanted you to share that story, because I used to believe that there was like, you needed a certain amount of time with a person to fully figure them out. Because obviously, I looked at divorce rates, my parents were not together, like all these things. I was always deathly afraid of, getting into it with somebody and then having to struggle through a divorce, especially with kids. But I started realizing as I'm getting older, and maybe you can attest to this, we're like close in age, and Jessie, I know you're like still on the lower 20 side, but you know what I'm saying. But I feel like over time I've started learning like, oh, you don't need the 2 to 3 years that it takes to fully flesh out who someone is, because that's scientifically how long it takes. And I put that in quotations because how much the science know about people. Everyone's so vastly different. But like in your case, I feel like it all happened so fast, but like you have these beautiful stories on your Instagram about everything, like the trip, your trip to Japan, which we haven't even got into that, or the amount of stories you talk about Kuma and like the soul and magic that he brought into your life, and like your wife and the magic that brought, and now you have 2 kids with her, and like and I think you guys been married for how long now?
Depends on the timeline, but I guess we can I guess we could say 2 years.
Right, but like it feels like
we've been together for 5, so it's
and it feels so much longer. Like it looks longer. And like to me, back in the day, I used to be like 5 years is not enough time for me to want to have kids with a person. I've been 7 years with my partner, but like not to have kids with a person, not to get married. I want to wait like 10 years before we move to that point.
Right.
But now, like as I'm getting older and I see relationships such as yours, I'm like, oh, that's not it. There's something about the experience you have with somebody, the way you guys meet. And that's why I wanted to bring this conversation up in this podcast, because there's some magic there. Like meet and have this adventure together and then co-create this beautiful life. I mean, I'm looking at the background of your house right now. It's gorgeous. Like
thanks.
All the books, the little couch, the little, for those listening, I'm just kind of explaining like, like you have this beautiful lifestyle that you co-created together now.
A lot of books.
A lot of books, right? And you've been together 5 years. And I'm like, Jesus, I've been with my partner for 7, and we don't have the lifestyle that you have. We don't have any kids. We're not married. Like, but
and that's okay.
Exactly. Like, I think that's okay. But at the same time, like people like yourself inspire me, because it's just like, oh, they did it in less time.
Well, I've been kind of interested in like the concepts of accelerators in general. So like we've been applying a lot of that to personal finance and financial independence. But I think what happened with us was actually an accelerator, considering the fact that we decided to go on this trip. And this trip was almost half a year, and it was us in a very small confined space, having experiences that were not necessarily typical experiences, and having to problem solve and work together and argue and, work through all of these things and be very also real with each other. And I think that's something that, um, if people want to have, success in their relationships, they have to also be willing to be 100% vulnerable with who they are as themselves as a person, in addition to continue to work on themselves as a person, have, ambition and goals if that's their prerogative. And they really also need to align with whoever it is that they're deciding to spend their time with and be with. Like, you know I think, for example, one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life is the decision of, marrying my wife. Like, and reason being is not just because of everything that we have or whatever. It's also, she and I are actually like parallel. She's my weaknesses, I'm her strengths. It's, we just, we function.
Right.
Not only do we love each other, not only do we want better for the other person, we'd also believe we don't possess each other. Like, I want her to have freedom to do the things that she wants to do in life because I love her. you and the accelerator for us was being in that car, on the road. Uh, and we spend more time together than I think many couples spend together in 10 years. And I think the conclusion was for us, like, hey, at the end of this thing, we still like each other, like, a lot. you know, I think this is something that is definitely going to work. And that's literally it.
It's so funny that you bring that up because I remember reading in a book, and I'm gonna paraphrase it. And I don't remember who it was, but they're like, in this book, it was a relationship book. They were like, there should be a rule that's like, if you want to marry somebody, you have to live in one boxed room together with a red button and just deal with each other for like a month straight. And
I
like
agree.
whoever hits the red button, that means you gave up. Like you shouldn't get married. But if you can last the 30 days, you're good to go. And it's like you guys co-created that
Yeah.
on purpose.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah.
In a car.
Seriously. And for real, I mean, it's because a lot of, I think, just love and marriage in general is, you're working together to problem solve. And if you can't problem solve together, like, it's just like, it's not just like this magic of, puppy love.
Right. That doesn't
like,
last forever, y'all.
life is a series of puzzles and problems, and you have to be able to think critically through them. And doing that with another human mind is not always going to be a cohesive thing. Like, there's going to be disagreements, and in those disagreements you have to then be able to then actually come to an agreement without killing each other.
I hear that, man. I hear that. Jessie,
Yeah.
you came off mute. I think you had a question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in perfect relation to what you were just talking about co-creation, because when sorry, I have a truck coming by. When I hear your story, everything from what you created in the military for yourself and everything outside of that, and we didn't even get to really get into your photography and some of the other things you do, but people can go check out your Instagram. We'll have that linked and just see the dope shit you create. But one of the through lines, even in meeting your wife and that story and everything you guys did, it from an outsider's perspective, and this is why we have you here to dig in. From an outsider's perspective, it seems like these things were just happening. Like it seems like oh, life, like you got a good luck charm and life was just happening for you.
Right.
And things were just turning out in your favor time and time again. And that may be true, and what I've become more fascinated with lately in my own life, as someone who works as an independent contractor, as a freelancer, as a creative, and Ruben and I were just talking about this too. It's like there's a level of consistency without certainty,
Right.
that you learn to live with on a day-to-day basis. And I'm curious to understand what your relationship with faith is, what your relationship, if you have a relationship with God, what is that?
Mhm.
If you, or if is it the universe, like whatever that is
Yeah.
to you. And are you, when these things are happening in your life, how much of it is, how much of it is things are happening, or are you setting intentions about what you want to happen in your life and watch things
Mm-hmm.
unfold? And just what, like I said, what is your relationship with these things and how has it grown over time for you?
Sure. Yeah. So I think number one, like I think anything in life, people only see a small fraction of that. So,
Mhm.
within that small fraction that they're seeing, a lot of people typically only see results of that thing, and they don't see everything else that goes on behind getting to those results. So, for example, I lived in my car for like month and some change. You know, this was 2000, the beginning of like 2015. I was bouncing at a bar, working all night. I was sleeping either in my car or I had sleeping on couches and stuff like that. And then on top of that, just working to figure out that situation. And when I was doing that, I remember saying to myself, I was like, okay, well, this is a crappy situation. It was just like one of the situations where you live paycheck to paycheck and, something bad happens and then you're effed. you know what I mean? So, yeah, I remember vividly just be like, okay, well, this is the situation that I'm in. You know, all I have to do is just improve it 1% a day. It's that simple. You know, you can't complain about it. And I remember just like laying down in my car, in the front seat of my car. Kuma's in the back seat, and I have the window open cracked because like the smell kind of like gave me like tightness in my throat because a little bit allergic to them. But see, that's how much I loved them. But the window was like a little bit down, and then like the rain was pouring in on my face as I was parked, in this industrial park. So that's the stuff people don't see, and I use that as an example because that's literally just the same pattern of an example you can overlay over anything else, whether it's starting a business, whether it's finding love. you know you're going to have to lay down in your car and get a little rain on your face and be uncomfortable, and it's okay. Like, as long as you focus on just the 1% every single day. Let me see here, the I got a book or something. The goal setting, you know what I mean, like the work. This is the work.
Mm.
this
And for
this
those
is
listening, he's showing it looks like a journal, I'm guess I see, with a lot of writing in it.
yeah, this is what I do every day. Like, and prior to this is just weekly tracking. Prior to that, every year I have this one.
Oh wow. Now we're putting out a similar
Yeah,
book style. Yep.
and this is just the plan for the year. And this is like pages and pages and pages and pages and pages. Yeah. So this is the rain on the face. This is the discomfort of facing yourself and, trying to have the self-awareness to understand who it is you are, what it is you want in life, and how it is that you're going to get there. And if you start asking yourself these questions, you can start kind of problem solving and kind of getting to answers about where it is you actually will eventually get to. And just because you write it out and just because you have intentions to get to a certain space. I bought a house in Vermont. My wife and I wanted to buy a house in California. We had a global pandemic. It's just one of those things where it's just like, you can set all the intentions you want in the world. Geographically, we're not where we are, but we wanted to buy a house about 3 years ago. So we started setting up ourselves for success in that way. And when it came time, we were able to do that. I just bought solar, last week. I have a whole solar system on my house now. Again, setting intentions, trying to figure out ways to, build more wealth in our lives. All of this, it's one of those things where if you just really take time to understand what it is you're doing in life and where you are and be comfortable with that, then you can figure out the next step as far as where it is that you're going. And again, just because you have intentions on where it is you're going doesn't mean it's most likely not going to be where it is that you are. When my wife and I met, it was, I think, 3 weeks prior. I have another book. I have a stack of them. I literally wrote out who it was that I wanted to be with, who was my model, like, woman, who is my wife. Wrote it all out. I did not include what she looked like at all, because that has nothing to do with any of it. What has to do with who it is as a human being. That's who it was. She's 100% that person. Funny thing is, she did the same damn thing about the same damn time.
Magic, y'all. Magic.
Yeah, I'm not even joking. Like, for real. Like, she did the same thing at the same exact time. Wrote it out, and who that person is, it's me. So as far as like intentions and stuff like that, I believe in having a map. I believe in trying to digest what it is that's going on in your surroundings. I mean, that's what we do as human beings. We take in stimulus from the outside world, and we then try to predict the future in some sensible way. And, we create a map to stay alive. That's really what this is, and as you continue to build your maps, you can continue to ratchet up and, develop then systems and blah, 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 blah. And that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, that's, and as far as faith and all that other stuff, I believe in myself. I believe that I have the ability to critically think and to look at a situation and try my very, very best to understand that the only thing I can control is my mind, and I cannot control what is happening outside of my mind. It's just my responses to, stimulus. Which is very hard and which I often fail at, because we're emotional beings, But as far as a God, I don't know. I am a scientist, so that's an easy thing to say. I'm a scientist. I believe in XYZ. I don't understand. We don't have we have a black box model of the, what nature is really, in addition to, what I got into at the University of Pennsylvania was, consciousness and perception. So there's a lot of things we don't know and that can't be explained, and it's, maybe I float along more lines of dualism and philosophy, but as far as a God, as a Yahweh, as a whatever, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of different religions and there's a lot of different repeating stories. So, and these stories are very much a part of us, in our reality. And I don't denounce anything. People can believe what it is that they want to believe. If they're happy with that, that's great. But I like to look at fundamental structures of what nature is, and then my own consciousness and how I interact with those structures and other structures within those structures. And
So when you are,
come up with a map, you know?
So when you are, I'd love to hear your answer to this. When you are creating your intentions,
Sure.
by your explanation, what system are you interacting with? What is your consciousness interacting with?
That's a very tough question. There's a lot of books over there. People try to explain that.
Right.
I'm nowhere near as smart as them. So, what systems? I mean, I think what it is just the intrinsic motivation for succeeding in life in general, you know, and whatever, like not defining success as like just like a dollar figure. I'm talking like just success in overall just presence and well-being and happiness. You know what I mean? um, so I think what I'm trying to interact with is the real who I really am, you know, and trying to, because I've been in this novel that I'm writing, it's has to do a lot with how time doesn't exist. You know, so like if you get into like physics and stuff, and
Sure.
then also it also has a lot of conversations with philosophy and consciousness, and these these worlds kind of like blurring together and interacting with each other. So that's kind of where my head is. It's just I'm just trying to be, I think, present, and this could be just like such a BS answer, you know, but you know, that's where I am. You know, I'm not the I'm not the smartest guy in the universe. You know what I mean?
Hear
These
you, man.
they can't explain it. Like I said, if they can't,
They tried.
I sure as hell can't explain it.
I think
We don't even know how the brain, like we know how the brain works, but we don't, again, we have a black box. Like we don't understand like why it is like, you know, we see a certain thing, you know, like what is the phenomenological experience of red? You know what I mean? Like it's, how does that happen? Really, something so simple. Like, you know, you have a, you know, tree of neurons that fire, you know, in structure, you know, in the mind, you know, in your visual cortex. And you know, what do these neurological signals then do to move you in a direction to go, oh yeah, this is green, you know, or oh, you know, I want to go to that thing, you know, like, and then the presence of that, you know, and then the ability to then plan, you know, it's, and then be, what is the I of it all, you know, who is it, you know, we don't have a homunculus, you know, who is this thing in our head, who are we having a conversation with, is that us? Like
It sounds like we're gonna have to have a part two.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, we're getting into the real deep parts of it. I'm pretty sure people are like, what the fuck is going on? I mean, like, yeah, folks, like these are the books that we be reading. And you know, Derek's reading it. We didn't even get to go into like your time in the University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But you know, definitely, I want to do a part two. I know I
Sounds
want
good.
into fatherhood. You know, as a
Absolutely.
you know, you have 2 children. Like, how's that?
They're
experience
amazing.
like?
They're amazing. I
we
mean,
heard a little bit in the background earlier. I was just
that's
like,
part
oh,
of it.
she's awake.
That's part of it. I mean, for real though, but that's like, you can't censor that stuff. Like it's kind of funny, like his,
Right.
I even saw like recently it was some guy on the news. It's kind of famous. Some guy on the news, and then the kids come bursting in,
Right.
and then like the I guess it's the wife like dragging them out, you know, and you know, it's just like this.
I remember
madness.
seeing that meme. It's
Yeah,
hilarious. Yeah.
it's just madness. But it's also like, you know, and he's just sitting there, and he's like kind of like, I'm like, dude, like, you know what? I would have picked my kid up and, you know, put my child on my lap and been like, hey, we're gonna do this interview this way now, because you know, it's funny because it's just like we have like the structures of professionalism and, you know, how we have to be a certain way, and it's like, you know what, like we have kids, and we're living in this like COVID world right now. Like we do Zoom all the time. Like there's this blend of these two realities. It's no longer this fiction of professional world versus like family life. Like we actually are just human beings, you know, and we're working on projects together. That's really what a job is. You know what I mean? Like, so it's okay if your kid comes running. It's okay if my kid is crying in the background. Like,
no, I love it.
That's real life.
That's human, man. It's
Yeah.
superhuman, you know. No, I mean, and I know that as a daddy, you got to get back to daddy duties.
Appreciate it.
So,
Yeah.
so
Thank you.
you know, I definitely want to close it here, but obviously for folks who are paying attention, the creative people out there, like, what are you working on aside from the book,
Sure.
and where can people find your work and what you're
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. So website is Derek Rowe Photo. That's just I got pictures up there and you can contact me on there if you want to do that. Instagram, which I'm really starting to like. I'm just Derek Rodenbeck on there. They're annoying. Instagram. I did have a reel. I had something go viral like December, and then I had a reel kind of go viral yesterday. But I'm kind of interested. I'm into TikTok right now. Like I'm really having fun with the platform as far as just making little short videos and yeah, I'm not dancing around. I used to break dance, but I don't do that on there. um, but I you know just try to offer a little bit of thoughts and wisdom, you know, whatever wisdom I might have accumulated over the years, and pass that along. So TikTok's pretty cool, and there's some organicness and engagement on there that Instagram used to be. Facebook killed it.
Yeah, Facebook did kill Instagram, but you know, it's where people are finding people, but also TikTok,
Yeah.
and all of that will be in the show notes below,
Cool.
including your website. And I know that you still do photography work around there. I know it's COVID right now, but people are
Yeah, I'm
interested.
out and about. The drone can, you know, it gets you places.
It gets places, so we
Yeah.
can work there again. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Derek.
Yeah,
Your
yeah.
story, as always, is phenomenal, and you're just a wonderful human being, a beautiful human being, and I appreciate you know being able to call you a friend, buddy.
I
So
agree, man. And you know, hopefully when things calm the f down, uh, I'd love to come out and see you. You know, at some
yeah,
point I
man.
could take
You
you to
gotta
Death
come over
Valley.
here.
Yeah,
Yes,
Come
yeah.
on. That's the energy we need.
yeah.
Vermont's what's up, but I need to get back to Death Valley. Like I lived there for like a month. Like I need to like I miss it. So,
Okay, then we're going to Death Valley.
yeah, let's do it. I'll show you around.
All right, all right. Well, folks, you know where to find Derek. Show notes will be in below in the description. And again, thank you so much for being with us today,
Thank you
Derek.
for having me. Really appreciate you both.
Yeah,
All
thanks so
right,
much, Derek. Peace,
all
y'all.
right, y'all. Peace, y'all.